Halo Wars 2. To some, a mere Halo spin-off, but to others, a home where they can flex their RTS fandom in the Halo universe. Halo Wars 2 launched on February 21st of 2017 on both Windows and Xbox One, however unfortunately it was only on the Windows Store. It is obviously the sequel to the 2009 Halo Wars, with a sizable gap between the two entries. This is for a whole slew of reasons, but one being that the original Halo Wars was developed by the now defunct Ensemble Studios, who are most famous for their Age of Empires and Age of Mythology franchises. And honestly, while we're not going to dive too deep into it, the development story of Halo Wars 1 and just the whole story behind Ensemble Studios deserve their own videos. Today though, we'll be focusing on Halo Wars 2, which was developed this time by Creative Assembly and 343 Industries. Obviously, you all know who 343 is, being the Halo studio, and I'm sure many of you know who Creative Assembly is. However, if you don't, they have a long history of successes, most notably the Total War series that has been around for ages, and to some the 2014 survival horror Alien Isolation. The premise of Halo Wars and Halo Wars 2 has always been pretty simple. Take the real-time strategy formula and adapt it to play well on console, while also giving it that unique backdrop that is the Halo universe. Both Halo Wars 1 and Halo Wars 2 have done this amazingly, with lots of improvements and additions coming in Halo Wars 2. The original Halo Wars was pretty positively received, and while one could say that Halo Combat Evolved was the first time that first-person shooters felt good on a console, Halo Wars is arguably the first time that the real-time strategy genre felt properly adapted to the console and the controller. While it was by no means the first RTS to reach the big screen, it was in my opinion the best attempt at it yet. Now this did come at the downside of what many argued was watered down gameplay, and there is no denying that. Compared to its PC counterparts at the time, or even earlier in history, Halo Wars always felt a lot simpler. This though would prove as both a pro and a con. While some criticized the game for its lack of depth, many others actually praised how approachable the game was compared to some of the other RTS games of the time. The game featured a variety of leaders you could pick with slight differences, with the main factions being the Covenant and the UNSC, and in the campaign you played from the UNSC perspective. This campaign was pretty positively received, though many did say it was not quite at the level of Bungie at the time. This is what Halo Wars 2 attempted to build off of, and they did just that. Development for the game actually started in 2014 when 343 approached Creative Assembly about a collaboration due to their experience in the RTS genre. The game was eventually announced in 2015 at Gamescom and ended up launching in February of 2017. This was after a delay pushed it back from its original release window in 2016. Again, similar to its predecessor, Halo Wars 2 received generally positive reviews. The campaign was again pretty well received, with the campaign cinematics by Blur getting a ton of praise. This time, while we again played from the UNSC perspective, we dove into the story of the Banished for the first time. This is a story that has now continued onto Halo Infinite. Similar to last time, many reviewers enjoyed the fact that the game was very approachable for beginners, but some did note that there was a lack of depth for the most hardcore of RTS players. Again, controller controls were generally praised, though this time, since the game also came out on PC, there was some criticism toward the mouse and keyboard support. Upon release, Halo Wars 2 actually debuted in the second place on the UK's weekly retail chart, but there is no denying that Halo Wars has always been a bit more of a niche offering than the main FPS series. For the most part, offerings in Halo Wars 2 stayed pretty consistent with what you had in the first game. You had that single player campaign, or you could play it co-op where you played from the side of the UNSC. Then you also had multiplayer, which included a variety of team sizes from 1v1 up to 3v3, which could be played against bots or other human players. And then Halo Wars 2 actually included a totally new mode called Blitz, which we aren't going to go too deep into here, but this was a game mode focusing around the use of cards, which deployed units or abilities onto the field at the expense of energy. This game mode to me was pretty similar to Clash Royale. The mode, while interesting, had pretty mixed reception due to its implementation of microtransactions that you could use to be able to buy those cards. Post-release Halo Wars 2 saw the addition of a variety of new leaders and units, along with 2 different DLC campaigns, though one of them was only 2 levels long. The biggest and last DLC was the Awakening of the Nightmare DLC, which ended up dropping September 26th of 2017. This DLC brought a 5-level campaign based all around the Flood, 2 new leaders, 2 multiplayer maps that were available to everyone regardless of whether you bought the DLC or not, and a new multiplayer game mode called Terminus Firefight. Oddly enough though, this DLC was not included in the Season Pass for Halo Wars 2, so excited fans who wanted to check it out would have to fork out the full asking price, which was $19.99 USD, or whatever your regional equivalent was. The gameplay in Halo Wars 2 stayed pretty consistent to the first game, which you can almost boil down to a fancy, shiny game of rock, paper, scissors. In Halo Wars 2, the Covenant have been swapped out for the Banished. Don't get me wrong, there's a ton more strategy and mechanical depth that goes into Halo Wars 2, and there's actually plenty of additions and changes from the first game that improve the game that a more hardcore fan could outline, but at a high level, the game still plays pretty similar to the first, with the way that the units are built, where they're usually strong against another unit type, whether that's air, infantry, or vehicles. This leads to that fancy game of rock, paper, scissors in a way where players can build a specific comp to try and hard counter what their opponent is building, or you can try and mix and match the units to have a more fleshed out army, or obviously a whole slew of strategies. While player counts for Halo Wars 2 are a bit harder to find since the game never came out on Steam, we can use the Wayback Machine to see how long roughly it stayed in the top 50 on the US version of the Xbox Most Played Games. This isn't perfect, since you are limited by the available entries, but we can see here on March 25th of 2017 that Halo Wars 2 was still barely holding in the top 50 on the very last row. Unfortunately, after this, the game never found its way back into the top 50, but despite that, the game has nourished a loyal and hardcore following. With its last new DLC being over 5 years ago now, the community hasn't had a ton new to enjoy. On top of this, in recent years, 343 has seemed to shun the game and the community almost entirely. Between bugs that were never fixed, leaving the game in not necessarily an unplayable state, but definitely not a great one, and balance changes that were sorely needed for the meta, the game has definitely grown a little stale over time. There has even been cases where servers have gone down for the game, with 343 not even acknowledging it for days. To 343, Halo Wars 2 does truly feel like the redheaded stepchild. Despite this though, passionate Halo Wars fans continue to log onto the game and play it on a daily basis, with hopes that one day 343 will come back to it and update the game, or at the very least maybe put it on Steam, or in their wildest dreams start working on a Halo Wars 3. Today though, we're here to answer one simple question, and that is, can you still play Halo Wars 2? But we're not going to go in alone because obviously I'm not an RTS pro, and that is why Andy from Team Respawn is going to be joining us in all the fun. So let's hop on in.
Okay, hello everyone, it's Andrew from Team Respawn. We're going to play some Halo Wars, and we're going to win.
Yeah, for sure. Well, welcome, man. I'm glad you could join me. Like you said, we're playing some Halo Wars 2 today, and he's going to kind of hold my hand a little bit, as I'm a bit of a Halo Wars 2 noob. Played some Halo Wars 1 back in the day on the old 360, but I never really got into the multiplayer of this one. But Andrew definitely plays a good amount of it.
You know, it's a great game. I think the multiplayer can be a little intimidating for new players, but at least I think people should give the fair shake of it, at least playing the campaign. Campaign's pretty great in this game as well.
Yeah, I played the campaign a little bit before Infinite came out, because obviously the storylines are, well, I don't even know if I'd say they're really that tied together, but they both have the Banished in them. So I checked it out, and the campaign is definitely very good. Like, both the Halo Wars games are fantastic games. I'm just unfortunately not a huge RTS player, which is why I never got too big into the multiplayer, but
right.
The games are really good for what it is, and I always thought it was super cool. Like, it's more so with the first one, because that's what I played more of, but I really liked how Halo Wars kind of brought RTS to a console in a way that actually felt decent. Because I remember as a kid playing Command and Conquer, one of them came to console. I think it was like the Tiberian Wars, but the controls were so janky, it was just not fun to play. Like I would have rather played it on a mouse and keyboard, but I feel like Halo Wars plays great on a controller.
It does. They did a great job of making sure that it was both simple to learn, but also like the control scheme worked in such a way that it made sense. And that's where like the notorious all units scream kind of comes from, right? And fortunately, the Halo Wars 2 control scheme is almost identical to the Halo Wars 1 scheme. But I do think if you're into Halo, you should at least just try out the campaigns, because I think especially with Halo Wars 1, there's a lot of familiar calls to other Halo games in that one. And of course, Halo Wars 2 introduces Aatrox and the Banished, so for those who love those characters in that setting, it's a great primer for Infinite. So there's a problem with this map that some players dislike, and the way it's designed is it's very defensive. Do you take a look? We're kind of on a cliff over a cliff.
Yeah.
And the only way someone can push us with ground is through a bunch of choke points here and here. So matches on this map can take sometimes a considerable amount of time. So that can accidentally happen. That's when turtling can kind of occur in Halo Wars.
So what's the input method meta in Halo Wars? Like what do the best players play on?
Surprisingly, most pro players play on controller. I think it's just the way Halo Wars 2 is designed. It still favors a controller playstyle.
Yeah.
There are some pro players that do mouse and keyboard, but it's really uncommon. It doesn't mean you're at a disadvantage on mouse and keyboard. It's just controller is pretty great.
Do you think at this point in Halo Wars 2's life cycle, other than for like a convenience or quality of life thing, do you think the Steam release would still like do a lot, or is it kind of too late?
It's kind of hard to say. I think my answer is biased because I'm a Halo Wars creator and I'm really involved in this community. I think a lot of regular viewers and players of Halo Wars would really support this. Mm-hmm. It's difficult to say. Age of Empires made a comeback. Thanks actually in part to a modding group, and they kind of got some new DLC in Age of Empires 2, and that ultimately led to remasters of all those games. And Age of Empires is thriving right now.
That's really true.
I do think a Steam release would certainly help keep this franchise alive and going, and have new players try out this experience. But I don't think it's going to become, as popular as StarCraft or something by any stretch. So this barrier in the way is a leader power from, oh my god.
That's a lot of stuff going on.
That's a very heavy anti-air. Oh, perfect. Thank you.
I clicked something.
Yeah.
You lost a base like way north.
I'm trying to keep this game a little bit slower pace for you.
There's a lot
it's a lot.
I'm sending my people over here, but I don't know how much I can.
Yeah,
I made them all. Oh, dude, I outplayed him. He used some beam, but I made all my guys invincible.
Yeah, perfect. That's actually a great use, actually. So you did your unbreakable.
Yeah, I think regardless, though, all my guys are still gonna die, but we gave it a good shot. I'm kind of just using my leader abilities at will, hoping that they're a decent time.
I like what you're doing. And I think this is going to be one of those big gambles here. We'll see how this plays out. They just used... Oh, that's a great use of your glassing beam.
He's like microing all his people away from it. It's very annoying. I'm very upset about what he's doing. Oh no, he's going to move him. No!
I mean, I gotta say, don't take this the wrong way, but I gotta say, for someone who's like your first time playing Halo Wars in, 5 years, you're playing excellent.
Well, thank you. There we go. Got some of them.
I just...
Alright. One of these fights should be the final fight.
God, I hope so. I'm kind of wanting them to throw in the towel here. They're not really making any headway. I'm thinking about pushing. What do you think about just having an all-out offensive? I would say is like, as your army kind of depletes, maybe fill it back up with Reavers.
Okay.
But also sprinkle in say probably a couple of engineers will do you some good.
Okay. So is the ranked mode pretty active in this game still?
It is, yeah. I mean, I find ranked matches really quickly still. Oh goodness, this might actually be it.
I will say, I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm only like 40% sad.
And 60% happy.
Yeah, I mean,
You know what? You're not gonna hurt my feelings. This is one of the worst outcomes. Is when that's why actually this game kind of turns off a lot of players, because there are some instances where this can happen, and that drives people nuts.
yeah. I think this can happen though. I feel like in any RTS, that's just kind of
Some of them, I think
Maybe
this
less
is
so.
probably it. I might just destroy my bases here.
all right. Yeah. Hey, I mean, I had a good time. We played an 80-minute game, so I don't know. It was all right. Toward the end, I won't lie, it started to drag a little bit, but I think that's because I just felt like I was hitting my head against a wall.
I mean, yeah, you and me both. I mean, it's I hate it that you get this is how you experience it, because the game is much better than what we saw this evening. What you really saw is the culmination of bad map design and a bad balance with incorrect, really sometimes win conditions, and you get like this perfect storm of purgatory, right? But I
Yeah.
mean, actually, you destroyed the most units. Look at you.
Hey, let's go.
So you're actually like top performer here.
Let's go. That's what you like to see. And that is going to do it for the video. Thanks again to Andy for joining me and playing some Halo Wars 2. It was a pretty good time. Make sure you go over and check out his channel if you don't already do that. Other than that, leave me some comments on what games you want me to check out next, and I'll see you all next time.